So I'm Alan Johnson, KU2Y, and this video is about how to use the web SDR in the ARISS Radio Pi. So you run the ARISS Radio Pi, and this is the screen you have on your Raspberry Pi. There's two ways you can run it. You can double click on this desktop icon, or you can go under the Raspberry here and select it here. But either way, it says web SDR. Now, it's called a web SDR because it basically is a web server connected to the RTL SDR dongle. And so what happens is it puts the radio functionality into a web server. So in order to access it, here I'm running the Chromium browser on the Raspberry Pi. So it's just a normal browser and a normal web page. So this is the view you get. It defaults when it first turns on because you can have various bands and modes. It defaults to the weather band. So it says RTL SDR, which is the SDR radio that we're using, and this is the weather band. So it's about 162.4 megahertz. So it's in the VHF, very high frequency range. And I currently have my antenna mounted outside. It's just taped to a window. And so you can see there are 4 different weather radio stations that are in view. So let me just talk about what this view represents here. So basically across here is frequency. So you can tune different frequencies by clicking around here. And if I click around, you'll see the frequency here changes. In addition, you can also, if you highlight it, you can actually type in a particular frequency you want. And it will tune to that. And this, most of the screen here is taken up with what's called the waterfall. Now, it's called the waterfall. You have to imagine like you're looking at Niagara Falls, and the river flow is coming towards you, and then the water goes over the edge and drops down. So you see this continuous movement of water going down. So that's why they call this the waterfall. But basically, it's a time series, right? It's updating in real time, and then it's scrolling downwards. So the information that's scrolling off the bottom is from, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds ago, whereas the information at the top is most recent. Now, the color indicates the intensity of the radio signal that is received, and blue and black are the lowest. Those are very low amounts of radio waves. Then you get to yellow, get stronger, red, and then I think pink is the brightest color here. So by looking at that, you can see that this one here is the strongest because it has yellow and red, whereas these other ones here just have a little bit of light blue. So I'm going to click here. Oops, not that one. I'm going to click on that one right there, and I'm going to unmute it here. So we have these controls, and I'm going to unmute it so that we can hear it.
In a period of 10 seconds after midnight, a chance of thunderstorms.
So this is NOAA weather radio. So this is pretty much available in all parts of the U.S. If you're in a major metropolitan area, you might see multiple transmitters. If you're in a remote area, you might only see one. And it's just continuous weather forecasts for your particular region. And one thing you can notice is that if I click on one of the weaker ones here, you can still hear the signal, but it's scratchier, it's noisier, it's not as clear. And if I select this super weak one here, you can barely hear that, but it is there. Now, in order to tune in better, you can zoom in on this to see more clearly, because right now it looks like I'm tuned in. I clicked near it but it's offset by a little bit, and you hear how it sounds distorted. So in order to fix that, I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to use the plus magnifier here. You can also use a pinch and zoom as well. Okay, so now I'm really zoomed in. Now you can clearly see that I am not lined up. So this yellow bar, the center here indicates the center frequency. So that should be centered about the signal here, but it's clearly not. And the yellow arms represent how wide, how much of the radio signal we're listening to, which is known as the bandwidth. So one easy way to do it is you can click on the waterfall. So I'm going to position my arrow here on the center of the waterfall. And now that sounds a whole lot better. Okay, so that's how you tune around, and you can just click around. If you're getting just noise, like this is, that's not very pleasant to listen to. There is a squelch. This is the auto squelch, so I'm going to click this button here, and that will automatically raise a threshold so that signals below that threshold, it doesn't send it to the speaker, so you don't hear it, which is kind of nice. You don't get that noise, but now if I click back, because this signal is nice and strong, you hear it. So you can also manually adjust the squelch by sliding it, but of course if you have it badly adjusted, then it's not going to work for you. But you can always just hit the button to activate the auto squelch, which is nice. So the other thing is, there are different demodulation schemes here. Right now we're set to FM. FM stands for frequency modulation, and that's where the frequency of the radio signal is varied with the signal that you're trying to modulate. The signal you're trying to modulate in this case is the voice that is reading out the weather forecast. Other ones include amplitude modulation. And then there's two sidebands one here, lower sideband and upper sideband, which are typically used for ham radio communications. And CW, which stands for continuous wave, which is the term that hams use for Morse code. These additional ones here are digital modes. Now, if you happen to have it on the wrong setting, like for instance, let's say I have it set to USB, now when we hear it, it'll sound very distorted. So that's a so that is a sign that I am using the wrong demodulation. Some of them don't quite sound so crazy. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out here. So that's the basic operation. Now this assumes that you've got your RTL SDR plugged in and you have an antenna. If your antenna isn't working, this background here will be it'll be like a constant color. It might be blue or black, but you won't see anything there, and that's an indication that maybe your antenna isn't hooked up. The other thing that could happen is your RTL SDR dongle could become unplugged. So let me unplug mine just to simulate that. So now there's no longer radio signals getting received by the web server, so it has nothing to update here. So you see the waterfall is frozen. Okay, and normally when a web page freezes, you hit reload. So I can hit reload here. So the web server is still working, but there's nothing going on here with the waterfall. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quit and run it again. This time I'm going to run it by double clicking on the web SDR here. But remember, my RTL SDR is still unplugged. Now when it starts up and notice it's not there, it gives you the error message here, no SDR device available. So now I'm going to plug it back in to the USB connector, and I don't think reloading is going to work. Nope. I do need to quit and run it again. Now we'll see if we are back. Very good. So we are back.
The National Weather Service forecast for the southern Pocono.
Okay. So this is, we've spent all this time on the weather band, around 162 megahertz. We can change bands by bringing this drop down here where it says RTL SDR something. And we can switch, for example, to the second one here, which is the 2 meter band. So I'm going to switch to that one because that often has interesting things on it. So this is the amateur radio 2 meter band, and you can see from the frequency here it's about 145 megahertz. So I'm going to pick this packet frequency here. This is a digital communication that hams use known as APRS, Automatic Packet Reporting System. And I'm going to unmute it here. Oh, did you hear that? That was a digital packet arriving. And you can see it this is a zoom on the waterfall there. And you see see that's got a bit of pink there, indicating it's very strong. And below it here, you can see where the actual packet information is decoded. So it's got the call sign of the sender. So these are ham radio stations near me, and then a little icon indicating what type of traffic it is, and then the information from it. In this case, a location, Franklinville, New Jersey, or in other cases, the type of equipment that it is being used. So there's many other digital packet modes as well. I can switch to another one here. If I switch to the 70 centimeter band, so this is also a ham radio band as well. Let's see. Right now, there's lots of bands to choose from, and you can do research on which ones have which signals, or you can just tune around and see what's there. One I like this 462 megahertz FRS GMRS. That stands for Family Radio Service, General Radio Service. These are the little, you buy these little handy talkies, and I have a lot of commercial activity around me. I'm in a metropolitan area, so there's lots of workers, construction workers, things like that, and so I typically see quite a lot of activity here. So you see all these little signals here are different users. Let's see if we can find one that's voice, because some of these are just digital data, and it doesn't sound like much. Like, let's see if I click on this one. Mute here. I'm going to zoom in a bit to help tune in. Maybe set some squelch. That would be a good idea. So let's see. Okay, so that's a digital signal. That's some kind of information is being encoded there. So that's not very interesting. Let's see if we can find a voice. You hear that? That was very weak Morse code. Okay, I'm just going to try to get a bit of voice here if I can. But I don't see anything that looks like voice. One of the fun things about SDR is that you not only get to hear radio, but you get to see it, right? You can see what it looks like. See, to me, that looks like voice. That's a little hard to hear, but those are workers talking to each other. There's a crane operating not far from me, and I can often hear them saying lower, lower, higher, lower, things like that. But you can see lots of interesting signals to listen to. I think that is about it. Some of the, if you just look down the bottom here, is the status, and typically you want your server CPU to be not in the red, but in this case we are in the red a little bit at 93%. Once that gets up to 99% or 100%, then things might start to go wrong. Otherwise, it's just showing you that you have basic connectivity. So I hope you've enjoyed this look at the OpenWebRx Web SDR on the ARISS Radio Pi.